There is a pattern that keeps showing up. The people who pray the most, consistently, daily, sometimes for years, are often the same people who feel the furthest from God. That should not make sense, but it does. And the reason it does is something most people never talk about. Because here is what usually happens. Someone prays, nothing changes. They pray harder, still nothing. And then the quiet voice in the back of their mind starts whispering, maybe nobody is listening. Maybe you have been talking to the ceiling this whole time. And that thought is the one that terrifies people more than any sermon about sin or judgment ever could. Most of the time when someone brings this up, the answer they get sounds like this: God is testing you. Or it is a season of preparation. Or the enemy is blocking your prayers. And those answers feel like something for about a day, but they do not actually address what is happening. Because the real question is not why is God silent? The real question is, what if silence means something completely different than what you have been taught? There is a story in 1 Kings chapter 19 that most people know half of. Elijah, one of the most powerful prophets in the entire Bible, has just called down fire from heaven, literal fire, in front of hundreds of people. And then, right after that, he runs, not toward something, away. He runs into the wilderness, sits under a tree, and asks God to let him die. That is the part people skip. The greatest miracle worker in Israel wanted to quit. He was exhausted, terrified, alone, and God does not give him a speech. God does not say, "Get up, soldier, the battle is not over." What God does is strange. He tells Elijah to go stand on a mountain and wait. So Elijah stands there, and a wind comes, a massive, rock-shattering wind. But the text says, God was not in the wind. Then an earthquake. God was not in the earthquake either. Then fire. And God was not in the fire. Here is the thing. Elijah had just seen God in fire. That was his whole identity, the prophet of fire. And now, standing on that mountain, fire comes again. And God says, I am not in that, not this time. What comes after the fire is one of the most misunderstood phrases in the Bible. Most translations say a still, small voice. The original Hebrew is closer to the sound of thin silence. Not a whisper, not a quiet voice in your head. Silence, but a silence so specific, so present, that it has weight. Elijah recognized it immediately. He covered his face, because he understood God was closer in the silence than he had been in the fire. And that is the part that changes everything. Because most of us, most of the time, are waiting for fire. We are waiting for a feeling, a sign, a confirmation, something loud enough to cut through the noise in our heads, and when it does not come, we assume God left the room. But what if God never left? What if the silence is not absence, it is proximity? What if God is closest when you hear the least? Nathan sat with that idea for a long time before it stopped sounding like a nice thought and started feeling real. Because the honesty is, silence is uncomfortable. You cannot build a YouTube video around silence. You cannot put silence on a bumper sticker. It does not sell. It does not perform. But it might be the truest thing about prayer that nobody is willing to say out loud. So if you are in a season where God feels distant, where you have prayed and heard nothing, done everything right and still feel alone, maybe the invitation is not to pray louder. Maybe it is to stop looking for fire and sit in the silence long enough to notice what is already there. That is not an answer. It is a question worth sitting with. And next time, a question most people will not dare to ask themselves, about who the real problem might be. Not out there, in here.